I mentioned to you when we were looking at the 24th hexagram, that the 24th hexagram, because that was the first place in which we met the right angle cross of the four ways. And as I explained to you then, that in each of the quarters of the zodiac, that they always begin with a Sphinx gate, and they always close with a gate of the four ways. These are the bookends, if you will, of each quarter. A Sphinx gate to begin it. So in this particular quarter of civilization, we began with the second hexagram, and here we get to the end of that process in the 33rd hexagram, the gate of retreat. This is the gate of the witness, and this is the voice of remembrance. I remember, I don't remember. And it is keynoted as privacy. This is one of the three gates of aloneness, and this is a stop codon. It's essential for you to see that three of the stop codons are all in the throat gates of the abstract. The 33, the 56, and the 35. The 33. This is the point in which the abstract process fulfills itself. That is, this is the point that through privacy and retreat, reflection is possible. And because this is collective, the need to come out of the retreat, to share the remembrance. This is the role of the witness. To go into retreat, to reflect on experience, and when the reflection is complete, then to share with the collective remembrance. At the mystical level, this can be the gate of revelation. The unconscious 33. Active withdrawal and the transformation of a weak position into a strength. Now, the weak position is lack of reflection and lack of privacy. It is not possible for 33s to sort things out in a crowd or to sort things out under pressure. They need to be able to withdraw and to reflect. And then they can be clear. So the first line, the foundation, the line of introspection, it speaks of what this way is. This is the way of avoidance. The sun exalted, the wisdom in a weak position to recognize that survival demands complete withdrawal. And all this is saying is that until you've completed your reflection, there is nothing to share and nothing to say. You know, the 13th gate at the other side, this is the gate of the listener and the gate of secrets. And it's very difficult for the 13th gate ever to release a secret, but the 33rd gate is in the throat. And because it's in the throat, it's always possible to release a secret, disinformation, misinformation, whatever, unless it's had a chance to reflect first before it shares. So survival, I mean, that's how important it is. That to be private and have that opportunity to reflect is a question of survival. And survival for the psyche. This is one of the primary gates of aloneness. It's a very powerful gate of aloneness. Mars and detriment, where courage is just plain foolishness, unable to retreat when overwhelmed by stimulation. This is about speaking without reflecting And when you speak without reflecting, it doesn't necessarily make any sense. We call it babble. Remember, this is abstract. The gift of remembrance is to be able to make sense out of the past for the other so they get the picture. That they can really make sense out of it. And of course, unless the reflection has taken place, then they're not equipped, they're going to be extremely subjective, and they're not going to be clear. What you're seeing is the pressure of the throat to speak. Any throat gate that you have is always exerting pressure to speak, to work, to operate. The second line, surrender. From what we know about second lines, we can see that surrender is not going to be uncomfortable for them. They surrender to being in their space, in their retreat, in their reflection. The recognition that surrender to superior forces can be an opportunity to expand one's own strengths and eventually triumph. Embracing powerful forces in order to lay the foundation for future success. Now, these powerful forces that are mentioned here, these are the forces that try to bring you out of retreat, because these are the forces that you have to deal with when you come out of retreat. If you're not equipped, if you haven't reflected, you're not going to be prepared when they pull you out. You're a second line, they are going to call you out. They're going to call you out to remember. What do you remember? What happened? And they're not ready, and they're not equipped. Neptune in detriment. Unlike the reasoned and calculated surrender above, the deeper and personal surrender, the feeling that one's original position was a delusion, and the impressionability that makes might right. A public embrace of powerful forces and a private resentment of their power. This is a lower trigram. This is lower trigram privacy. These are people that are very much want to be left alone, but at the same time are under the strain of having a collective voice. The first line needs to go deeply into its reflection and is often ill-equipped when it's pulled out. The same thing is true for the second line. This business about might makes right is that in having to go into their privacy to reflect, that they have to accept that they can't get their way, that they can't just talk, that they have to be equipped, and that they can only be equipped after they've reflected and they're clear. They're forced to remember, and they're forced to remember by forces that are superior to them. They're forced to talk. I mentioned to you that 52 people go to jail, so do 33s. And by the way, when I say jail, don't just assume that that's an assumption of criminality. You can be locked up in your room as a kid. The third line. Spirit. Trial and error in being private. Trial and error in trying to reveal your remembrance. The 33, like the 31, is a gate of influence. It's just as much in that sense a leader, but it is the leader of what's happened, not the leader of what's going to happen. It guides us to recognition of what has happened. And of course, again, that remembrance is only clear after the privacy. after the reflection. Spirit, the attitude that turns retreat into victory. Jupiter exalted the responsible and principled retreat based on preservation, but with a determination to persevere. This business about the determination to persevere is about you have to come out of the retreat. It's easy for the third line to go into retreat. It goes out, it bangs into something, it says, I had enough of that, I'm going back in here. The exalted gives it the courage to go back out again. And going back out, what I mean is to reveal, to remember, to share with others that remembrance. Mars and detriment. A lack of responsibility in retreat, the bridge burner. These are people that, when they go into privacy, they kill everybody that they leave behind. I mean, they kill them psychically. You know, this is immature retreat. Now, the reality is, without any morality attached to it, it's simply a necessary aspect. It is a drive for privacy that will cut off its relationships often abruptly. Don't bother me and don't ever bother me again. I don't want to tell you anything. Whereas the exalted is privacy is a path to success. And of course, one of the things that you see is that success is something that is inherent here in this third line. And it can come either way. The bridge burner is often somebody who simply cuts something off abruptly because they've banged into something that's going to be a lot more successful. And they know that from their experience. And of course, they can make a lot of people angry who they leave behind. The third line is based on a wave of bonds made and broken, always. And remember something about that. All third lines are designed to enter and leave. But that does not mean they don't have to come back again. And here you have the example of that. You know, the exalted is that you can go out and then you can come back. And then you can go out and then you can come back. And the detriment says you go out, but you never do that again. You come back. Because you don't go out again with those forces. It's very difficult for the lower trigram in a collective gate to be able to fulfill its social responsibilities of sharing. It doesn't really know who's over there to share with. It isn't prepared for the consequences of collective sharing, which is criticism, disbelief. Criticism in the logic, disbelief in the abstract. You know, you reveal your story, you remember. Remembrance is all about whether somebody's going to believe you or not. Always. The fourth line. This is where revealing begins to take place. This is where remembrance can enter into public discourse easily. Because, of course, this is transpersonal. And the fourth line is there to externalize two things. Its need for privacy, and at the same time, its need to share its reflections. And that is a balance. At least that is the goal. So the fourth line here is dignity, a lack of turmoil in retreat. In other words, the recognition of the value of retreat as the place where the reflection and clarity take place. And everything is about timing. So it's the recognition when you know there is the other side. You know that eventually it will be there for you. And so you can wait in retreat without turmoil. Pluto exalted the underlying faith in resurrection that turns retreat into an opportunity for renewal and regeneration. That is, the healthy retreat for regeneration. Resurrection. This remembrance, those people that are interested in reincarnation, that the memory of reincarnation is here in the 33-4. It's there. That is the memory of it. And that in certain individuals, it's possible for that to come out as some kind of explanation or description of past life. Yeah. Whenever I say things like that, I instantaneously regret it, you know? I mean, I'm not in charge of what I say, but when I hear myself say stuff like that, I say, who the hell cares? Put that aside. That's not important. That's distracting. So forget I said that. Okay. Neptune in detriment. Without the guiding light of resurrection, the inevitable disillusion that leads to degeneration. That is, a drive for privacy that will cut off its relation... Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong place. Forced to retreat and unable to see its regenerative qualities. In other words, these are people because they're here to externalize in this life. And after all, that's what they're here to do. And because they have to go through periods of retreat, which is the opposite of that, they can become very uncomfortable with just being in retreat and very uncomfortable with just being in that realizing program. And they would really rather be out there sharing what they have to share. They can be quite unhealthy because of that. Throat gates. When throat gates do not operate according to the person's definition and type and authority, they're always going to result in problems in the thyroid system. And the thyroid system affects all our metamorphic processes in the body. So it's very important to see this knowledge of where your voice is, where it is not, is the first lesson in human design about the throat. You know, like me without my 56, if I keep on saying I believe, not about what that means, not about what I'm believing in, but every time I try to use that aspect of my throat that does not belong to me, I do damage to my physical throat. I do damage to my thyroid system, and I do damage to the way in which metamorphosis takes place in me. Because I'm trying to do something that has nothing to do with me, and I'm trying to use something that is not designed to work for me. So this being a throat gate, you know, it is under pressure to express itself, but to express itself under the right conditions. And that goes back to you living your design and entering into things properly. How often I repeat this. You know, the essence of understanding mechanics is to recognize that being awake is a mechanical process. You know? I mean, if you get it, that this is all mechanics, then being awake is a mechanical process and it takes 7 years. It's just a mechanical process. You know, if you're in the mechanics, if you're consciously involved in the mechanics, it takes 7 years for that mechanism to kick in. It's just mechanical. The fourth line of dignity, see, when you're in retreat, they come to get you. You can keep that on the tape, Yeah. Juxtaposition cross. The 24 and the 44, these two ways disappear and they're replaced by the 1 and the 2. Very interesting to note that, of course, the 1 and the 2, the first and second hexagrams, are hexagrams of direction that are part of the Sphinx. So it's interesting that instead of having 4 ways, this juxtaposition cross has 2 ways and 2 gates of direction. It also has its own power in the way in which it can move and guide. And the juxtaposition cross is called the juxtaposition cross of retreat. And of course, here you're going to have a deep focus on the importance of retreat. And these are going to be people that make retreats and retreat a part of their life. They are going to be privacy freaks. The left angle. The left angle is called the cross of refinement. This combination of the 33 and the 19, these two ways, retreat and approach, with the second and the first gate, the individual direction. This is the cross of refinement. So you have the four ways, retreat, and then refinement. Isn't that lovely? In other words, you have the four ways, and then you have your retreat, so you can reflect on it, and then you have your refinement. How do you get that out into the world? Because that's always the transpersonal dilemma. And the fifth line is the secret, and it's the secret to everything. This is the refinement. Timing. It's all timing. Yeah. Everything is about timing, and we're not in control of the timing. We are designed to operate in time. That's different. We're not in control of the timing. Pluto exalted. As important as the timing itself is the ability to keep secret one's intentions until the appropriate moment. Here's your fifth line, General. And they know precisely what they want to remember and when they want to remember it, so that it will have its greatest impact, and who to remember it with. That's a gift. So they can be very stimulating, and they can be very reliable, and that's relative, to those people who call upon their remembrance or who have things revealed to them through them. The ability to keep one's intentions secret. This is so important. You see, unless one is clear in reflection, one has to be careful about what one reveals. 33s reveal things without knowing they're revealing. They're just blah, blah, blahing. And while they're doing that, people are dying inside because they're saying things that others can hear. I mean, when you have, may you be protected from a 33 child. When the school teacher says to you, blah, 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 do you really do that? Anyway, they don't know that, it's quite innocent when you're young. So the fact of the matter is that keeping secrets, this becomes the challenge of this throat gate. It gets to know many things through reflection, and yet at the same time it has to have discretion. It has to know the right moment to remember, the right moment to reveal. By the way, because it's a line of projection, they get the projection that either they're manipulators or they're wonderful. Jupiter in detriment, the tendency to want others to participate in the selection of the timing which can lead to confusion without a sense for timing, letting others in on the secret prematurely with resulting confusion. So look, everybody projects on the 33.5 that they've got a secret. Everybody projects on the 33.5 that they know something that they should know. Now the exalted 33.5 never lets on. Even if it's obviously confronted with the fact that other people are projecting on it that it knows something. No comment. And when you get to the detriment, you want other people to share in the timing. You want them to say to you, now's the time to let your secret out. People are waiting. They're projecting on you that you have something to say. And then you let them know what it is so they can have a better idea of how to help you with the timing. So everybody in the office knows you're holding something back. And then finally, under pressure, what's the matter, what's the matter, what's the matter? You finally say, well, you've got a new job and you're going to be leaving in about a month, but you don't want to tell anybody because you only have to give 1 week's notice. And that, you're trying to figure out whether that's the right timing or not, blah, blah, blah. And the moment other people get involved, that information goes right through the entire office and you're fired the next morning. Now, of course, for those people, that's supposed to happen. And that's not a bad thing for them to happen. It's just that's the way that it happens for them. The whole point about timing is that timing is the most important thing of all. That 33rd gate, what is it in the definition? What type is it? After all, the 3313 is a projector channel. It has to be recognized. The remembrance in that sense always has to be called for. Maybe you can tell me. Maybe you remember. The 6th line. This process of timing, this is refinement, after all. This is our refinement in the experiential process. The lesson to be learned at the end is the right timing. And of course we know that the right timing is how you enter into things, because then the timing is guaranteed. As long as you want to do something on your timing and you're a generator, you will never, ever, ever succeed in this life to be at peace with what it is to be you. It doesn't matter what you remember, if it's accurate or not. If you don't enter in according to your type and definition, nobody's paying attention. It has no value. And the remembrance is there to have value, to be a value to humanity, to be a value to the collective pool of experience. The 6th line of disassociation, the ability to let go, the ability to retreat from the world. I know I have this. The complete ability to disengage oneself from the planet and to be so isolated as to have great difficulty in coming back and being able to tell anybody anything. The Sun exalted, the will to concentrate on revitalization and not be handicapped by persistent recriminations. That is, the ability to let go and retreat, to enjoy privacy, to enjoy the aloneness and the process of reflection. But of course, the sixth line, like all sixth line, get burnt early in life. And so retreat becomes a way in which the reflection is everything and the sharing is nothing. They collect a lot of experience. They have an advantage structurally. They sit on the roof of the house. They have a broader perspective. The 33-6 tends to have a broader scope upon which it tries to remember. It's not like the externalized 4 and its fixedness. The Jupiter in detriment, the ability to shed the larger framework that precipitated the retreat, leaving nagging doubts that hamper revitalization, the inability to completely let go. In other words, the inability to completely be at ease with aloneness and reflection. And of course, out of that, the possibility of re-emerging and trying to share one's remembrance. As a sixth line, this duality here, it is the same process. Like the second line in retreat that has a natural home in retreat, the sixth line has a natural home in retreat. And so they're much more reclusive than in any other situation. Mystically, it is the 33-6 that can confirm revelation. Or not. When one has completely let go, only then can you find your role. And of course, that's the next gate. That's the seventh gate.